There's a cat behind Stephanie.
Yeah. Yes.
I'm just gonna judge everyone while we're sitting here.
I mean, that's
Well,
what
sure, yes. All right. I don't know. I'm
We're live.
going to let somebody else take over for this.
All right, so welcome to the Space Sirens Book Club. I'm Angela from Literature Science Alliance, and Stephanie, you go next.
Hi, I'm Stephanie from Miss Richards Reads.
I'm Carrie from Carrie Louise Reads.
I'm Kayla from Crack Into a Good Book. Oh, I see. Justine just logged on, I think. Let me add her.
Hello.
There we go.
Yes.
Hello. About the slight delay.
And I guess if you clicked here, you're here to talk about Jade City with us. Did we want to do a spoiler-free-ish section like you guys did last time, or just forgo it? I don't know.
Why not?
Yeah.
All right. So spoiler-free things we can discuss. Well, what did you guys think? Did you like it and did you not like it?
I loved it.
I loved it so much I bought the hardcover like you did.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I did not like it.
Is there a spoiler-free way you can talk about that?
I mean, oh yeah. I'm not a fan of like gangster or kung fu stuff, which is so that was lost on me entirely. If I'd enjoyed either of those genres, maybe I would have liked it more. But also, like, I love character-driven books, which this was, but I have to like the characters, and I didn't like any of these characters.
That does make it hard.
I mean, one of them I liked until about halfway through, and then something happened, and then I didn't like them anymore, which when we get into spoilers, I'll talk about why that bothered me. And then there was, I did like Andon. He was the only character that I did like, but then I didn't like some of the way he was represented, which I don't know if that's spoilery or not. But then the other issue I had is actually right at the beginning, which kind of set me up to not like it. So the first characters we meet only really appear, well, one of them only appears in like the first chapter, and then the other one only comes back and occasionally and aren't central to the story. But because they're the first characters we meet and they have this kind of like underdog plot line in that first chapter and a half that they're in, I thought the book was going to be about them. It was going to be an underdog story. But then we meet the actual central characters. So I think even if she just structured that first chapter differently, so that we met the No Peak clan guys first, and like if they'd been the first characters we met, I would have had a very different expectation from the book. But I think that that initial setup led me to expect something that was very different from what I actually ended up reading. So.
No, I think you're right. When I first picked up the book and I read chapter 1, I'm like, I don't know what this book's going to be for me, but I knew it wasn't about them because enough people had talked on BookTube like, this is about this family. I'm like, oh, you're not part of this family. You are a Christian boy. But no, I totally see that. The first chapter wasn't huge for me. And like you meet Hilo there, but it's like from someone else's perspective.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I definitely don't. I like the characters more, but I don't like the same characters as other people.
Same, actually, yeah. I feel like everyone sort of identifies a little bit differently with each character. Not necessarily as like, I see myself in this person, because if you see yourself in some of them, that's not a good thing, especially for my favorite character. But I feel like everyone has such a different reaction to each character and to kind of the side characters and stuff. And they're very gray, all of them. No one is necessarily like the good guy because everyone has all these flaws and stuff. I can definitely see if you're not someone who likes kind of the violence and the gangster vibes, it's definitely not a book for you because that's the book.
No, it was reminding me of like those drama TV shows. Like I've not actually watched The Sopranos or what's the one, Succession. I haven't actually watched those, but it reminded me of those vibes. It kind of reminded me of like House of Cards and like things like that, where it's like that bingeable, like, but very dramatic and everyone's kind of bad and just looking for power sort of thing. But
Yeah,
yeah.
definitely.
Yeah. I really like
my Goodreads. I read what?
Oh, go ahead, Kayla.
I read this 2 years ago and didn't reread it. So
Yeah, no, I read this last year, I think, or the year before. So
Yeah.
I'm a little bit like, try not to
and
spoil
then, like, I
anything.
just read Jade War. Yeah,
Yeah.
who's with the third one? A couple months ago with Lena. So I'm gonna like try to not like try to distinguish what happened in that versus the first book.
When we talk about spoilers, we'll tell you where Jade City ended. It'll be pretty
Yes.
obvious, and then you can
Yeah. Dax.
No, but so something I liked that I think spoiler free you can talk about is I really did like the world. Like it really, you could see the parallels to our world. I actually don't know what Asian fondly is, but I kind of sort of saw this as like, I don't know if it was Japan, but it felt more Korean maybe in terms of like history of like the world. And I didn't know if the one European country was Spain or England, but like I liked connecting it to like our West versus East own history.
I read it as being
how it's done in the
like,
popular.
Yeah, I read it as Hong Kong as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just
I think
because of the history of like Britain and China both having had control over that. That's kind of what I felt was the inspiration. That was the one thing I actually did like. I thought the world building was really, really
it's fabulous.
on. Like,
yeah,
I could really picture everything she was talking about, and it was really vivid. So that was the one thing I did like about it.
Yeah, I remember being really impressed by that, even down to like the economy of Jade and sort of how it works out economically. I thought that all of that was just incredibly well done.
And I don't think I can talk about a lot about what I like about the magic system without being too spoilerly, but I Stephanie has talked about it. I really love the consequence system of the magic system, I guess.
It's a really good hard magic system, which I love.
It
like
also doesn't really feel like a magic system, which is really interesting.
Yeah. It kind of, I mean, I've been watching The Boys, so it kind of was also reminding me of like part of what happens in The Boys, which I won't talk about if no one's watched season 1, but it was very reminiscent of stuff there, which The Boys I don't think you would like if you didn't like Jade City.
I would watch that.
Because it's very, no one's good and blood.
It's really brutal, isn't it? I heard it's really brutal.
Yeah. I watched The Great British Bake Off after I watched The Boys. What I do with my life.
Bake Off is much more like my level of everyone's nice to each other and there's cake at the end of it. Like.
See, I'm one of those, I can read it in books, but it's hard for me to watch on TV.
I'm the same, yeah. I struggle with violent sort of visual media, but if it's in a book, I'm like, that's fine. His head's been cut off. It's cool.
You're like rooting for people like, yes, get him.
Yes.
Yeah. Which I did through a lot of this.
Yeah.
Anyone else have spoiler-free thoughts before I guess we can talk about spoilers? That's more
fun. The family dynamics in this, without going too spoilery. I felt like a lot of the issues they went through were relatable.
When I think it was with you, Stephanie. We talked about this, like the emphasis on family. You could tell is on a culturally different lens than like what we're used to. The respect of elders and stuff, and that importance of tradition and loyalty was very high. Not even just for gangster, but I think for like the culture that this book's based off of and stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I loved all the sort of inter-family relationships, even when people were frustrated with each other and wanted to like strangle, their sister or their brother or whatever. They still have this kind of deep, deep, deep love for each other. And I think that's one of the things that resonated so strongly with me, because I find that you don't always have those incredibly strong family dynamics in fantasy. Usually it's like the lone wolf out by themselves. They're not like hanging out with their sister. And I really, really loved that, especially as someone who's really close with their family. We're not a gangster family or anything like that. But
Or are you?
maybe.
Ian's family as a gangster family, they all knit, but there's
Yeah, but it's like stabby knitting. I don't know. But yeah, no, I just loved seeing that. I love seeing sibling relationships in books, and you just get that so strongly in this.
Mm-hmm.
No, the Hilo-Shay relationship is when like Shay's like, oh, I could push his buttons, but I should try not to and like be an adult. I'm like, oh, that's me when I go home for Thanksgiving with my sibling. It's a normal thought process.
Yeah,
Exactly.
it's sort of alarming how normal it is, because they're also like going out in the streets and like, you know, fighting each other. And like fighting other families and stuff and coming home like covered in blood, and they're like, oh, my big brother's done this. It's just like, wait, what?
Another one.
Well, that was the thing. Like their culture is very aggressive, right? Like you're not supposed to turn down a challenge, but then if you win, you're supposed to play down why you won.
Yeah.
Like, that was like this whole part of like the competitiveness of this area of the world, which I thought was, again, in world building, really cool.
I kind of like how formal it was. Like, oh, you beat me, and then the winner's like, oh, I didn't sleep well last night.
Yeah. All right. I want to talk about spoilers because we need to discuss the Hilo debate, because I know there's going to be one, and I just need it to happen because I have thoughts.
Yes.
All right.
So are we officially in the spoiler section?
Sure. And so as we go, Jade City ends, Kayla, with after Anden fights a dude and kills the dude and decides not to take Jade and Hilo from the family.
Yes.
Right.
That's where it ends.
Oh my god. There's so many of those kinds of moments in this book where it's just like
I was thinking after the fight scene, I'm like, okay, now we're in the end. There's like 50 pages left. The big fight scene happened. I can enjoy it. And then Anden goes and B's like mature, and I'm like, ah.
Oh, so good. It's amazing how she can make, you know, this is, I don't want to speak for everyone here, but for me, it's basically a completely sort of new cultural lens, as we were saying, where there's kind of different emphases on things, and sort of system of kind of tradition and everything, and how you downplay certain things and you play up certain things and all that. The fact that she made us all care so much and know that at the end, when that happens, you're like, oh shit, but you've only just been introduced to this world like 500 pages ago. I think it's really incredible how much she makes you kind of like understand how important these things are.
Oh yeah. I mean, well, and also just when, I know we're at the end of the book now and we're not talking about anything at the beginning, but when Anden takes that power to do the stuff for the fight scene, and like that a dramatic change in his personality in those moments was just so, because Anden's like a cinnamon roll that I want to protect at all costs. And I love that he's like a student who learns and who doesn't have a lot of hubris. Like that's all the things I love. If you're going to have a very talented character, I love him to have a good ego. And then all of a sudden he's like, oh, I love killing. And I'm like, oh no, no, poor baby.
Well, it's the tragedy of Jade, isn't it? Like, it's such an incredibly powerful thing. And if you can see this character like Anden, who has this family history as well, it's so tragic. It's just, oh, it's so good.
Well, and that's why, like, we were talking about this magic system, it literally felt more like a performance-enhancing drug that some people just had a better tolerance for than others. Some people maybe just weren't as addicted to. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, that's what stems most of my hatred for Hilo. Is because I did see this as like a drug addict scenario where Anden's like, oh, I know I have a problem and I have this family history, so I'm not going to pursue this. And then Hilo wants him to do like meth or heroin, like the itches when you have that scene with the mother in the bathtub. Like
yes,
like
it sticks with you.
Like.
Yeah, and I think so. The other character that I liked and then didn't like was Shay, and it's for that reason. Like she's worked so hard to separate herself and make herself alive, and so it's like she has got over her addiction, and then she's sucked back in, and she like it's like using that analogy. It's like she relapses, and she gets pulled back into this world that she's fought so hard to get out of. And that really upset me. And that was the point when I was kind of like, I don't think I'm going to get out from this book what I'm hoping for.
No, it's not a happy ending kind of.
Yeah.
No, and I mean, I was kind of the opposite because I think like their family, like they have a dependency on it, but they have like, they're the type of people who could smoke a cigarette and like put it down and not think about it for 2 months. Like that's their relationship with Jade in terms of tolerance versus Andon's family is like one time and they're like addicted for life sort of thing. And I was kind of just knowing she would eventually get her Jade back, and I was just waiting for the moment. And I was sad when it was because Lan died, because I loved Lan. I really liked his level-headed leadership style. I'm like, this is a refreshing head of a mafia. I'm like enjoying this. And then I got nervous. He had too much Jade because he's over the edge. And I'm like, oh, what's going to happen? And then.
And it's totally not what you expect to have happen. Yeah. He's kind of one of those characters who's too good to survive the book. So I kind of thought that maybe something was going to happen to him, but it was not what I expected, because she was setting you up to think about overdose. And instead it's, it's just straight up murder. I was in a train station. I listened to these on audiobook. I think I listened to these in maybe 2018 or so. And I was in a train station at Oxford, standing on the platform, and that happened. And I literally went, and like, that's a moment in that book. She really, she goes there. And speaking of Shay, I actually had the opposite reaction. I really didn't like her because I thought I'm a terrible person. I love the bad characters and I love anyone who's just doing bad stuff, because I just have fun with them, which is like the opposite of me in real life. But Judith is here. She's seen me try to commit a very low level crime before, and I basically hyperventilated for an hour. I'll tell you guys what that is later. I kind of was less interested in her. I didn't like actively dislike her, but I was less interested in her initially. And then it's that moment where she's in the car and she's like, stop at the bank. And she goes to the safety deposit box and she puts her Jade on. And I'm like, yes, give in. I'm a terrible person, but I thought that was one of the kind of most powerful moments in the book, because it is tragic. It's horrible that she's turning back to this thing, but she's doing it for her brother and her family. Oh God. This book is so gray. There's just so much gray area because we're all terrible.
I like that she gets foiled to the head of the mountain, because that's also an ambitious, powerful, female wielding Jade, because this is still kind of a patriarchal like society. And you have these two very like powerful, independent women.
Listen, I'm not good at this kind of thing.
Well, I don't even know what I was saying, but I just liked the foil when they did have that like powwow in the book, and she's this one person's trying to be all logical, like, Hilo's not like the best person to have right now. Realistically, this is how things play out. Like, I'd rather work with you. And then she's so loyal to her family. And like, it was like a different.
Yeah. That's interesting too, because that goes into the whole sort of interesting sort of cultural lens again, where they can be so peaceful when they go and they speak and they meet with each other, but they're still like killing each other in the streets. So I just thought that was really interesting.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and I think she did a good job of showing us when she did use side characters. I do think overall they were the least interesting chapters to me, but they were like important. Like when we saw the guy who owned the restaurant have to deal with that takeover. Like you get like these mini outlooks into what's happening on the street or from different sides. Like, I mean, I really didn't like Barrow. I do think like of all the plot things, he was the most plot devicey, predictable thing. Like, oh, here's this person you let go at the beginning and he's going to come back and be your undoing. Like, fine, whatever. I am kind of interested because, at the end he takes Lan's Jade. So what's that going to mean? But but I also feel like the more he's around, the more annoyed I get, because he is the weakest character in terms of character development.
Totally.
Like,
totally. Yeah, so going back to what you said earlier, I'm glad that he didn't end up being the central character. He was really annoying. Yeah. But that setup also annoyed me. So yeah.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember. I seem to remember thinking, I definitely liked Lan a lot. I really liked Shay and Andon and continue to like both of them in Jade War. And Hilo is definitely like my least favorite of the family. I know Justine loves him.
I love that he exists. I think there's a difference. I love that his character exists. I hate him as a human, although she does such a good job at writing him, because I think he makes sense when I'm in his point of view. I'm like, oh yeah, you're completely reasonable. And then when you see him in other people's scenes, I'm like, boy.
Yeah. It's one of the reasons I like him so much is I love it. I think it must be really difficult for an author to pull something like that off, because as you say, like, I'm just like, yes, you're so level-headed, and then it switches to Shay's chapter and I'm like, no, Hilo, what are you doing?
And like the choice that Fonda makes when chapter 5 is just this very graphic sex scene to highlight like Hilo's very like passionate, like possessive side of him. And she's very like particular in that scene. Like he puts a book on the table but marks the page. Like he is a very thoughtful individual when he wants to be. But like if you're not on his team or on his side, he's like the worst.
Yeah. Totally.
He's a very my way or the highway kind of guy.
I did think that the dynamic between them as siblings, I know we've talked about it a little bit already, but that he is the way he is because he's not Lan or Shay. So he was brought up in contrast to his father's favorite and his grandfather's favorite, and it never could quite be the favorite. And so he's trying to it felt like he was constantly trying to prove to himself and to everyone else that he was worthy of the position that he had, both when he was the Horn and then when he became the Pillar, particularly when he became the Pillar and had to step into Lan's shoes. So yeah, I mean, again, even though I didn't like the characters, her characterization was good.
Yeah.
What she was writing.
Well, yeah, and when he is the Pillar and you have his perspective chapter where he's like, I didn't want this, but like realistically, let's go down the list. Who else could be the Pillar right now? And he's right. There is no real other stand-in. Like, I mean, I would have loved if it was Shay, but like he said, and like we all know, Shay was too far removed and she was a woman. Like she would have had to do what the Mountain Pillar did. And like it's not productive at the moment.
Straight up kill everybody.
We haven't even talked about like the SN1. Is that what it's called? Like the methadone of this world?
Yes.
Oh, the shine.
That's so interesting. Yeah.
I don't know, because I mean that's going to be a huge player, because that's how the global stuff enters, because you have this thing that can now be more accessible to other places and people. And like, I don't know, there's that shame of using it, right? Because like Lan's the one who uses it and then accidentally overdoses on it at like a key point. And then like, I don't know, it makes Andon more calm again at the end of the book. I don't know. I just thought the parallels of this magic system to a drug were really interesting. I think it could have been done in a non-nuanced, here's a fun book you can read way, which is fine. I read for pleasure. That's great. But I think it was still done in a very good thematic way too. Like she really did like pull it apart. And I really enjoyed that. As someone who like, I have like drug stuff in my family, so I'm very picky about it.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm just like, you can do it normal, fine, whatever, and you can do it really bad, but it's rare when I see it like this is actually conversationally interesting and good, in my opinion.
Yeah, I love that she didn't make it black and white. Because you still love the person, but you don't want to sugarcoat the bad stuff. Yeah, and I like that she did not do that.
It's kind of interesting to root for them, I guess, to use their Jade and like be ridiculously powerful, because I mean it's like, you know, drugs, you don't want to encourage that, but at the same time you still want your characters to just like demolish everything. I don't know.
Yes.
Well, and it's interesting how like the relationship between Jade holders and the civilians, what do they call them? Like there's Stone Eyes, and then there's this one more indigenous population, because the people who can use Jade aren't actually from this area. They were first wave immigrants of some sort. At least that's what I got from the world building, who have no effect on Jade. And like we don't really have a good perspective of someone who just wants to live. Like we have like that one chapter with the restaurant owner But we mostly are just seeing this from the eyes of people who are just trying to keep power, and they're trying to rationalize why this is important that they keep power. But I'm not necessarily convinced by any of their logics. Like, they all try and say why, and I'm like, is anyone really better because we're doing all of this? Like, I'm...
Yeah. I'd love like a short story novella of just like the guy who works down at the dock who just has to deal with all these freaking green bones all the time coming in and crashing through his stuff and like ruining his day. But it is really interesting because you really don't get that perspective at all. You're totally right. And like, how do these people live who aren't associated with Jade whatsoever? Probably much less interesting than the people who are associated with Jade. But
yeah, because there's Lantern Men and then there's the Green Bones, but then there has to be a third class of people who are just like citizens, like what Shay tried to be for like a minute.
I feel like she said it and I can't remember.
Yeah, I can't remember.
It's been a while.
It's been a whole week for me. I have no clue.
Yeah.
I finished it early hours of this morning and it's gone already. But I am really interested to hear more about what you guys think about Shay and Ait, Marder, and Mike Quen, like the three strong female characters, central female characters, because that was something else that I found a little bit like I didn't like, but I'm interested to hear what you all thought about the characterization of the women in the book.
I really loved Wen is my favorite. And she does, not to spoil anything or whatever, but she does sort of come into her own a little bit more in the second book.
Yeah.
In the second book, I think she focuses a little bit more on the women in the second book, whereas I think the first book focuses more on the men. So you get more of that kind of growth of relationship, especially with, I can't remember her name, the head of the mountain clan. She comes into play a little bit more. But I really loved Wen because she's very much a self-made woman and she has very, very sort of strong sort of opinions and beliefs, but she's still sort of with this man who's batshit and incredibly powerful and in this sort of position to sort of do kind of whatever he wants, but she has this really, really strong kind of moral code and stuff, and she wants to help. And because he won't let her, she's like, well, screw you, I'm going to do it anyway, and I'm going to do it in this way that's really unique to me, that people really look down on. I thought she was fabulous, and I think she only gets stronger kind of as the books go. But I really like her relationship with Shay, because Shay is kind of like uneasy, I think, at first, if I recall, and they sort of start to bond a little bit more and more, and that sort of friendship grows, which I really like. I love the fact that there's more than one woman in these books. Like, it's great.
Yeah, I think I mean, we don't know a lot about the head of the mountain in this book, so we only really have one scene, and then we hear a lot about what she does. So I mean, she's definitely a very determined and persistent, strong woman. That's all I know about her. I really liked Shay. I don't know. I liked that she was a little calmer than Hilo. And then I do like how both Shay and Wen are like, we know we have this possessive, crazy person in our life, but fuck him. Like,
how do we deal with him? We deal with him this way.
Go behind her back. So I mean, I do like that, even though like it'd be really easy, I think, for Hilo to be with like a more submissive woman that's not who he's with.
And it's not what he wants either. One of the reasons that he loves her so much is because she stands up to him, which is kind of surprising, but at the same time makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah. What were your complaints, though? I'd love to hear them, because obviously I just didn't have the same experience.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, there's my edition has a short interview with Fonda Lee at the back. And when I read that, I kind of understood a little bit more where she was coming from with the female characters. But for most of it, I was like, these female characters, apart from Wen, like Shay and Ike Marder, didn't read to me like women. And so to me, so it was good that there were female characters in a genre that generally the female characters are just victims. So that was really good. And I did appreciate that. But she says in the interview something about that she thinks there are two wrong ways to portray women in male-dominated cultures, whether fictional or not, and that is either to ignore them completely or to pretend they're as prevalent and as accepted as the men, and both are unrealistic. So that's why she chose to write them the way that she did, which in principle, I get that, but it's a fantasy novel. Like, you can write, you've made up the world. You can write the women however you want, and that we accept that as belief because it's a fantasy world. Like, so I kind of like, I understood where she was coming from. But yeah, to me, they just, the way the women succeed in this world, in this book, is becoming like the men, and that to me doesn't sit right. I suppose because that feels too much like what our culture has been, that the only way women succeed and progress is to make themselves like the men in the world. So Shay and Ike Marder only progress and achieve in the world by becoming like the men that surround them, or trying to be better at being men than the men around them, not by actually being women and using their feminine qualities. But that makes it sound like a kinky thing, and it's not. Because that's the other way that women are sometimes portrayed in this sort of thing, as like super sensual, and that wouldn't have felt right either. But there is a way to be women and be successful without having to become like men. And I kind of felt like she went down a third wrong way of representing women in a patriarchal culture. But that's just my opinion. So.
That's fair. I think I connected with them because, for better or for worse, I think I was Shay growing up. I mean, I was a physics major. 10% of physics majors at Ohio State were women. So a lot of the times, in order to even exist, I had to be the top 3 or 5 in my class. But it's also something I wanted to do. So when I was reading Shay, I never thought this is a dude character. She was like me. And I believe I'm a woman, sort of thing. Like my gender identity, I've decided, is a she sort of thing. But I understand that, like, there's so many different ways to be a woman. It's just that Shay in particular happened to be what I identify as a woman. And that probably is because I live in the world we live in. I can't really relate to Wen. I think Wen's really interesting, but I knew she was like a woman, but she wasn't like me, because I've never had to fight to make myself useful, which I felt like she was kind of, because of the patriarchy, like trying to figure out her place and find a path, and she had to work really hard to find that path. But that's like a struggle other women have gone through, so a different woman would probably relate to that than me. But I mean, I guess, I don't know, I guess I know Shay like had to try and succeed, but honestly I felt like that was something the men weren't doing. Like, Hilo didn't succeed by being good at school. Like, that's not what Hilo did to succeed. He succeeded by being like the boy's boy and making a bunch of friends and charismatic.
And there was too, because he wasn't. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, Shay and Marder, the head of the Mountain Clan, both were succeeding by trying to prove they were better than the men. So Shay is constantly trying to prove that she is better than all of the men in her class. So,
yes, but she was like doing it the wrong way, I guess. I think you're right. That was her mentality. She needed to prove she was the best because of the patriarchy. Yeah. She missed the boat, though, because she didn't become better by doing it the way she did. She did it in a very feminine way. Our way is always to take accountability for like our actions and like control what we can control. And men are very much like, oh, I have that assignment the next day. I'll do it tonight. Like, I'm generalizing. I worked with a lot of men, though, and I've spent weeks working on an assignment they work on 2 days before, and we get the same grade. Like, we just approach a situation differently. So I related to her approach, even though she did it wrong. Like, she didn't form colleagues or friends, which is what you needed to succeed as like a green bone sort of thing. You need that loyalty. And I don't think she's going to try and be like the last weatherman, who was a pig.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting because it's hard to write a patriarchal society in fantasy in the modern day, because we're all like, maybe we could do something different. You know, there's a dragon in your book. Maybe there can also be a woman who like does stuff. So I think it is really, really hard. I am very curious. I hadn't thought about this before. I'm thinking about it now. I'm very curious how I would feel about this book if it was the exact same but written by a man. I wonder if I would be really annoyed, because I get really annoyed with men writing women, although some of my favorite authors are men. So I'm very, very curious as to how much my bias towards loving these characters because they are good characters, but also the fact that Fonda Lee is a woman, but she's also writing a patriarchy. If it was a man writing a patriarchy, how would I feel? So I don't know. It's an interesting thing to think about because it is just like, who wants to read about freaking patriarchy these days?
Yeah.
Not me.
I read enough about the patriarchy in my studies that I don't want to read about it.
Yeah, exactly.
No, that's valid.
But it's a very good point.
Yeah, that's fair. I think for me, like I classify this as urban fantasy, and she's clearly drawing on real societies and stuff. So I was never really bothered by any of that. Like, it's just a very cultural thing that she's drawing on. So I was like, I'll roll with it. And kind of like what Angela was saying, like, I majored in bioengineering in undergrad, which, like, as far as engineering goes, it's more equally distributed with men and women. But, I'm also doing biostatistics for my PhD. So it's very much, just being in a male-dominated field. And, like, I don't know. I feel like relating to Shay is definitely, I don't know, where I was at.
Yeah, publishing. Women are definitely, like, 80% dominant in publishing. So I don't have that experience.
So I'm going from teaching, which is a fairly female-dominated field, into like church leadership, which is still a very male-dominated field.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
I suppose it struck a nerve because of what I've been doing a lot of looking into the way women are portrayed in the Bible and in culture and stuff, and it's something that we talk about quite a lot. Like, my college is fairly equal in terms of numbers of male and female students, which is great, but it's one of the few colleges that do what they do that is. So yeah, I think that maybe that is part of it. Is just that I don't like reading about the patriarchy for fun.
That's fair. That is totally fair.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like a lot of the things this book does really well are things that you just don't want to consume, which is valid. Like, it's a pleasure read.
Yeah.
Like,
I think that is, and like, I really struggled with how to rate it because, like, objectively, it was well written, and there was lots of things that if I had been into that, I would have really enjoyed it. But there was just too much for me that wasn't what I was looking for. But it felt really unfair to give it a low rating. But I ended up doing that because I didn't enjoy it, and I can't rate a book that I didn't enjoy higher than books that I did enjoy. So.
Yeah. Well, reading is so subjective, and that's why I kind of get frustrated with a lot of the discussions about, like, you have to like this or you can't like this, or you didn't like this book. Oh my God, why didn't you like this book? It's my favorite thing, because it's all subjective. So that's a completely different tangent. That could be another live show. But yeah, no, I totally feel you. It's hard if you know that something is objectively good, but you just didn't enjoy it. Like, that's fine.
But you also need that rating out there because there's a reader like you who's going to have a bunch of friends telling them this book's great. But if they're like you, if they like what you like and they see your ratings like a 2 or a 3, they'll be like, oh, well, I typically like what they like. I mean, that's important. That's valuable information.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Like, with me and the Rage of Dragons, like, I can't tell you how good that made me feel, Justine, that you DNF'd it.
I couldn't deal with that book at all. That could be a huge rant. I wanted to love it so badly, but oh my God, if I had another fight sequence and another time of the girl, like, telling him exactly what to do, but getting no credit for anything that she's doing, I was just going to chuck it out the window, and I was on a train at the time. So, yeah. Yes. Oh, I'm really glad.
I'm very excited to see where I fall in that spectrum because I'm reading it in February or March for a different book club, which is why I haven't read it yet, because I know I don't want to sign myself up to reread something if I won't love it. I was fairly sure I would like Jade City enough to reread it before Jade Legacy, but I'm still sad that I'm not going to get to read Jade Legacy for a long time.
I know.
I think it just depends on if you read it at the right time too.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Because I started it a couple months ago, Rage of Dragons, and put it down for a little bit because I wasn't feeling it, but then I finished it and I binged it. So it just kind of, if I had tried to force myself to finish it, I might not have liked it. But since I picked it up because I wanted to, it's one of my favorite reads this year. So
totally. Yeah, I've had books like that before where I put it down and it's just like, I hate this right now. I'm gonna pick it up in a year, and I do, and it's one of my favorite books. But it's because sometimes you just need to be in the right place.
Yeah, but I understand why you didn't like it.
I wanted to love it.
It's sad, but I understand.
And I just think it's really ironic that the first live show that I've actually been available for, I didn't like the book, and I love so frustrating. Never mind.
But book discussions are more fun when you have people with different opinions, because otherwise it just becomes a gush fest, and you don't get to actually look at the material. Like, you brought up something we didn't think about, and that's amazing. I love good book club books. I'm never sure how pleasure reads work for book club until they happen, because it's like, it's like I my only thoughts are I had a great time.
It was fun.
So
Exactly.
I feel like we haven't really talked enough about Andon, because, as I say, he was the one character that I really did like, and I think
so lovely. He's interesting because he's another complicated character, but it doesn't seem like he's a complicated character until you get to the end in that moment where you're like, oh my god. But he's fascinating and he's so lovely. I want to stick him in an armchair with a cup of tea and just let him rest. Just give him some peace.
Well, that's what I imagine he's doing right now with their mom on that island thing. He's just reading some books for now. Because I know Jade War takes place, there's a time jump of a couple years. That's what I've been told. So
yeah.
I love that he's very what's the word? Layered. Like, he wasn't super great at everything right away. And then even in school, they said he wasn't the best at academics, but he was the best at like channeling. And I love that not everything comes easily to him. It's a struggle, which is so realistic.
I really liked when the pre-trials, I think, were happening, because he was very distracted, because I think that's around when Lan dies. I think. Like, who knows? It could have been a different traumatic moment based off this book.
There are a few.
I think it's around that. And it was very reminiscent to me of, like, I mean, I think we've all had to take assessments when we're not in the greatest of headspace. And like, for me, a lot of the time, sometimes that's when I do my best on exams, because I'm not overly thinking about it. I'm just like, whatever I have in me, I just give it, and I'm like very detached. And like, his detachment during that pre-trials was like so relatable. So for me, Lena, you're supposed to be in here.
Yeah, I totally agree. And just some people aren't good test takers either, and some people test themselves and can do it. Like,
I had a whole discussion with friends last night about how assessing intelligence is such a crapshoot. Like, what are you assessing? Like, are you assessing memorizing today, critical thinking, problem solving? Like,
well, it's like at my job for continuing education, I'm in insurance right now, and you have to take a multiple choice test. But all my education, like English and teaching and library, it's all projects and essays. And so it's like, I could tell you the insurance policy back and forth, but I'm not good at the multiple choice testing.
Yeah.
And Andon is pure love.
He is. He's a little nugget. I love him.
No, I love Andon. I wanted more. I know I get more in Jade War, but I'm also terrified because everyone goes in Jade War, and and Andon in the same sentence is terrifying to me.
I know. I don't want anything to happen.
I'm trying very hard not to say anything at all about Jade War.
I'm just not looking at your guys' face, so it's fine.
Totally neutral. I have a great poker face. I don't.
I feel like we're going to have a lot of angry messages in the future. Like, why didn't you warn me?
Confirm or deny nothing.
Listen, so I don't know how many, I know Kayla has, but I don't think anyone else has read Sword of Kaigen in this chat. I will.
I really want to.
I want to.
So, I mean, Sword of Kaigen is in many ways sometimes has more shit and more heartbreaking moments, but it's one book. So you get to go through like you get to go through a lot of catharsis.
Oh no.
There's a character in that book that reminds me of Andon, and I really love that character in that book. And so I have a type. I realized there's this character type that I must protect at all costs. And I think Lena knows who I'm talking about, but I don't want to say it because I don't want to like spoil things. But you should read The Sword of Kaigen, because if you liked Jade City, I think you would like it. I don't know about you, Cherry. I mean, it's not like a gangster movie, but it's sad. It's a war story, so I don't know. It depends. but it
Well,
has
and I think it's more of
waterbending.
like the same sort of culture, more like patriarchy. So I don't know if that would.
Oh,
if
if you thought the patriarchy was rough here, the patriarchy is way worse in Start of Dragon.
Yeah.
Oh no. Oh god.
But it's so good. It's a really
No,
great
but
book.
it's so good, and it has my favorite female character. Like maybe not favorite, but she's a top 3. She's
Yeah,
like
she's great.
she's like really good.
Well, and it's a self-pub book, right? And it just took off.
It's self-pub, and I think it's now even printed in paperback. Like it used to just be.
I have the paperback. Yeah.
Mm.
I
on my
can't
list.
remember if it actually won the like self-published whatever competition thing or if it was a finalist, but it definitely has a lot of success.
It got up there. I can't remember if it won or not, but it was definitely up there because I don't participate in that, but I follow it. And I had a friend who was in it at one point.
I was so impressed with it. It was such an impressive, like, not that self-pub books can't be super impressive. I just always feel like I want them to have access to an editor, and when you self-pub, you don't always get that access, and that shows. And this just felt like a published book. Like it was easily one of the best fantasies I've read. Like,
if anyone wants to buddy read it, let me know.
I'll hear you scream about it.
So with Andon, one thing that I said at the beginning, there was something that I was a bit unsure about with him. I wasn't entirely sure about the way his queerness was represented. Like, but again, I think that's the cultural of the world, that because there's a bit where he talks about he's cursed because he won't be able to continue his family line. And I just was like, I found that quite upsetting, I guess, in the same way as the patriarchy stuff bothered me. That bothered me, but then that's to do with the world and the culture.
Yeah, I think it's the same thing with like ableism. Like if you couldn't use Jade, you weren't looked down on, but people thought you were like cursed and unlucky, like if you were stone-eyed. So I think like that same like thing that happens with, oh, it's okay if you're gay, but like that's kind of unlucky, was also done in an ableist way with people who couldn't like use access Jade and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I mean, you have that for both of them, which is realistic to the culture we were given. But then again, back to your point earlier, well, why did we make it that way? We could have just had it been a patriarchy where like being gay is extra awesome. Like that's a way we could have had. Like,
I will say that his sexuality is explored more in the second book, which is natural because he's much more in the second book. But yeah, no, it is an interesting. I didn't pick up on the fact that he might be gay in the first book. I don't know what is going on. Maybe it's because there's an audiobook. But yeah, I did not pick up on that whatsoever. And the second book came around and I was like, oh, we're talking about sexuality. Oh.
Well, I had the same experience.
Was it Lan or Hilo? Somebody said it.
Hilo did, and he had a crush on the guy who like ended up being like one of the first people to pledge to Hilo, who like was anti-Hilo. Like that's the guy he had a crush on like the whole book.
Yeah, and then that was
really like tense because he didn't know if that guy was gay, but also like that guy was talking against his family, so it had all those like layers. I thought that was very like what high school would be like for these people. Like not only are you trying to like maneuver like normal like, I don't know if he would be into me or not. It's really hard to tell if the coding's not quite there. But also, like, he's talking bad about my family, and that's this whole other thing. Like,
yeah.
I don't remember that guy's name. It was started with an L, and his dad died.
Yeah.
I don't remember him at all.
I didn't think about it till Hilo said something, and then it was like, oh,
wait a minute.
But we don't know if it's internal.
Up like pretty much the first or the second, but like when he gets kidnapped, it already made references to the fact that it was ogling the other guy while they were clearing up the streets or something.
I just for some reason it didn't click in my brain. I don't know why.
Maybe I'm like honed into it now. I'm like, I want to see this representation, and I'm like happy that it's there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember picking up on that at all, but again, it's been 2 years since I've read it.
Yeah, that is a good point. Yeah, maybe I did and it just didn't stick in my brain.
Yeah.
Well, you also did audiobook, and like sometimes, you know, if you get distracted for like a minute, you miss a sentence.
Oh yeah, I was sneakily listening to it at work, so that is very likely. I should probably reread it before the third one comes out, but you know.
Yeah, this This made me immediately want to pick up the second book.
Yeah, let's do it. Do it.
Especially after that bomb was.
I'm gonna be real. Stormlight takes priority for the foreseeable future. Because I just realized Dawn Shard is supposed to be released before Rhythm of War, so I'm going to have to somehow finish Oathbringer and then read Dawn Shard and then read Rhythm of War. And that's like,
honestly, you're a masochist.
I'm not up on Sanderson these days. Is Dawn Shard another novella?
Yeah, based off one of the interlude characters, the trading lady with grass.
Oh, I like her. Okay.
I know. Yeah, cool. I'm very.
Is that one going to be available after Rhythm of War?
They're trying right now to edit it so that it's available before, like at least the e-copy.
Well, I mean, if you're not on the Kickstarter.
Oh, the e-copy you'll be able to buy off Amazon.
Okay.
It's just that you've already paid for it through the Kickstarter if you did the Kickstarter. The physical copy might take longer, but the electronic one would be available. No, Sanderson's a masochist. He's trying to do that and write the third Skyward book at the same time. I'm like, what are you doing? Like,
maybe he uses Jade.
The secret has been revealed.
Yeah.
His brain Jade.
He uses it to fight. He uses it to stay up 24/7.
His logic behind why he writes so much is the same for people who read a lot. It's just like, I just do X amount a day and it just happens.
And then he does live updates when he's editing. I'm like, how do you do this and not collapse from exhaustion? And he's got a family.
Yeah.
And events.
And he teaches.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry. Got into the Sanderson tangent, which I feel happens a lot.
Unsurprisingly, I won't be carrying on the series, but I'm happy to hear you guys talk about it in our group chat, and like you can tell me the bare bones of what happened, so that at least I have some closure.
Based off what you've said, I can't imagine anything else that happens wouldn't make you angrier. Like that's my prediction. I haven't even read Jade War, but that's my prediction based off what you've expressed thus far.
Yeah.
Like, I don't predict amazing things happening to And I predict epic things, but not good things. Like, his best thing would be to go off to that Spain country that I'm calling Spain because it was called like Esperania or something.
Espana?
Yeah. And like just hide away, but I don't think that's going to happen because he comes back in this book. So, yeah.
So what's everyone's kind of general rating? I'd be very curious, like a star rating out of 5.
I think I rated it 4 stars. Let me see. But again, like some of my older ratings, I'm like, I don't know how much I actually trust that. But it looks like I rated that 4, and then I rated Jade War 5. So, yay.
I think so. I've been playing around with my ratings. It's like a 5-star, but like probably the lower end of 5-star because there was like some plot stuff that like almost made it like a 4-star. But then as I just keep thinking about it, I keep enjoying, like, I think I was telling Stephanie this, there were definitely lulls in the pacing for me.
Sure, yeah.
But then when the thing finished, I really loved the finished product. Like, I didn't know how to tell them to like change it, sort of, you know?
Yeah. It's a journey rather than a destination.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're not looking at them, Judith. They're horrible.
I gave it 5 stars.
Judith, listen.
God.
Hi, bud.
I settled on 2, which it felt harsh, but it was probably a 2.5. But like, I've read books that I've rated 3 stars that I've enjoyed a lot more. And so even though I appreciated a lot of the writing, the craft that went into it, and thought a lot of it was really well done, I just didn't enjoy it. And ratings are subjective. I can't give a book, like sometimes I'll give a book an extra star in terms of craft, and that's, I kind of felt like I did with that I didn't enjoy it so much that I nearly gave up on it several times. And and it got an extra star for the craft, the world building that went into it.
Yeah. I think that's fair.
I had a package delivered.
That way the dog was going off.
Yeah, that's why they knocked. Sorry, I gave it 5 stars.
Me too.
Like Angela said, we had the same thoughts. Like, there were lulls, but I really admired the nuance in the way she wrote everything. And so that bumped it up to the 5-star for me.
Yeah. I imagine that if I'm assuming I'm going to like Jade War as much, if not more. So that would probably be a more solid 5-star. But this one's like one that like flirts with almost being like a 4. But like this one, like, you know how some books age well and other books you just completely forget about? This one is currently in my whole week of existing, aging well.
Yeah, I found that too, actually. When I read it, it's just, there have been books that I've loved. I gave this one 5 stars as well. There have been books that I've loved and given the same rating that have kind of faded from my consciousness. I still think about this book all the time. I still think about the characters. I still think about the decisions. I compare other books and sort of like their big moments to sort of the things that happen in Jade City. So I think it does have that kind of, for me, it has that sort of longevity, I guess.
Yeah. So yeah. Well, I guess we should probably wrap it up. Anyone have final thoughts and opinions they would like to share?
You should all read Jade War so we can.
Yeah, so we can put away our poker faces, which are terrible.
Justine Roxford me thinking I'd already read Jade War and almost spoiled things.
I am really, 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 really glad. I was like, you know what? I'm not going to say anything, just in case. I would have been like, Kayla, I would have been like, oh my god, that thing at the end.
Yeah.
I would have quit BookTube. It would have felt so bad.
It would have been fine. There's a lot of books where I'll know the big thing and it doesn't actually affect my enjoyment because if the author's good enough, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, that is fair.
Like, I mean, an example, the Broken Earth trilogy, I knew the big thing about the first book that everyone finds out later.
I figured it out about halfway through.
That so hard. And then I just got to enjoy all the breadcrumbs that made it obvious. And I was just like, oh, this is just great. And then I feel like I liked the next 2 books better because I wasn't looking for a big reveal like I think other people were.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah.
So.
Very nice.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think with that, I don't know if everyone's channels will be down below, but we all follow.
I can edit that in later.
Yeah.
We'll do it.
We don't have a date for our next. We have our book for our next month, but we don't have a date yet.
Yeah, we're doing Incendiary.
Yes.
I'm never quite sure how to say it. It's one of those words that I've only ever I've never heard it.
It implies fire, right? That's what I'm getting from it. Yeah. I don't remember the name. It starts with a Z of the
Zoraida
Cordova. Yeah. I read that one. I'd be very curious to hear what you guys think.
Yeah. I liked Bruja Born, or Labyrinth Lost, so I think I'll like this one.
Excellent.
But
it's not about bangs,
What was that?
I said it was
about gangs, is it?
No, I don't think it's about gangs.
Resistance groups.
This is about like an Inquisition maybe, and like a girl who has a power that people use but fear. That's all I know. But that's my gist.
Yeah. It's like a revolutionary group against sort of the big bad monarchy that's trying to wipe out magic. And she has this very rare and powerful magic.
Justine, is it a patriarchy?
Probably. I can't remember. Probably, yeah.
There's a revolution, so maybe she smashes it.
Could be. We all know my poker face is terrible, so I shall be looking.
I know Neeks really liked it, so I have hope.
Yeah.
Well, cool.
All right.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
I'm just going to do this till the broadcast ends.
Yeah.